This is Mr. Jarrett, and in this video tutorial, we're going to be working in Adobe Illustrator to learn about the Perspective Grid tool. And we are going to be creating a 2-point perspective design with 4 words. So first off, finding the grid tool itself is actually easy. You have probably clicked on it once or twice before and looked at me and said, hey, what did I do? What is this thing? The Perspective Grid tool is actually right over here, and it kind of looks like a little grid itself if you select it. And now that I say that, when this pops up, you're probably like, oh yeah, I have clicked on that once or twice on accident, and I didn't know what it was. Now, if this tool does not pop up on your screen like this, because we have multiple artboards here that we're working with, if it is somewhere else on your screen, please do not just drag these dots everywhere. Okay, that will adjust your grid, and that will screw your grid up for this activity. Now, before we do anything, I will show you here that there are different ways of doing this, different ways of showing the grid itself. So if you go up to View, Perspective Grid, you can see that you can change this to a 1-point perspective, a 2-point perspective, which we were just in, or a 3-point perspective. Okay, and you can alter all of these grids. There are directions and videos and all of that type of stuff online. But what we are going to do is just do the normal 2-point perspective. Now, if your grid is somewhere located elsewhere on your screen, the bottom right-hand dot of this grid will actually allow you to move this. So you can move the entire grid all at once. So you're going to want to kind of put the grid somewhat about right there, somewhere in the middle here on artboard number 10 down at the bottom. Okay. Now I also down here put some Perspective Grid quick keys for you and a little understanding of what we're working with. So the left side of this they call Grid 1. The right side they actually call Grid 3 because they kind of consider the bottom is Grid 2 itself. So it's not that I type these out of order. I myself think of this as Grid 1, Grid 2, Grid 3, but that's not how it's labeled. So this is Grid 1, Grid 3, and Grid 2. So that is editing those different grids. You're just pressing the 1, 3, or 2 button on your keyboard. To activate the grid itself, you're going to be doing a Shift-V, and it activates this. Turning the grid on or off is a Control-Shift-I. So Control-Shift-I. That's what I want you to do right now once it's in place. Just turn it off so that we're not dealing with it. And I want you to kind of zoom out, and you'll see over here to the left, I wrote word 1, word 1, word 1, word 1. So yeah, this should say word 1, 2, 3, and 4. I just copied and pasted and didn't really even think to change that. What I want you to do is pick out 4 words that, or you could do 2 and you could do shadows, but I'm going to do 4 different words that are school appropriate words. So for the first one here, I'm just going to do like my name. So I'll do Mr. Next one will be Jarrett. Seals. It's not how you spell seals. Seals, and then Tech Ed. Even though Tech Ed is 2 words, I'm making it 1 for right now. Okay, Tech Ed. Now, you can do something completely different. Please do not feel like you got to copy this. It could be something completely different than this. Or you could do your first name twice, your last name twice, and it will act as a shadow. What we're going to be creating is something like this when we're all done. And you can see we have a word on the left, kind of a shadow, a word on the right, kind of a shadow. And as you can see, these aren't necessarily the shadows of those words. So that's what I'm saying. If you want to select something that's the same, so it's like your first name in a shadow, your last name in a shadow, be my guest here. I'm just using 4 different words. Now, these are lowercase, so I'm going to show you a very quick way of changing those over to be uppercase letters. I'm going to get my black arrow. I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to go up to the very top where it says Character. Okay, the Character panel. The Character panel is where you can alter or change a whole bunch about type itself. The leading, the kerning, the spacing, the size, the scale. There's a lot of different options here that you can do. But the option that we're going to do is just changing this to all caps. So it's this double T right here, double capital T. Changes it to all caps. I also put this in a font that is a rather thick font. That's what Impact is, and I know your computer has this installed. You can change the font, but I know this demo will work perfect with the Impact font itself. Okay, so now with my 4 words selected, I'm just going to leave those alone over here. and I need to follow these next set of directions very carefully. First, we need to turn the grid back on. We already turned it off. So let's turn it back on. That's going to be a shift or a control shift and an I. Control shift I on your keyboard. That should turn the grid back on itself. Now we're going to activate the grid. Shift V will activate the grid. And you notice when it's activated, this little tool over here changed. It changed from the perspective grid to the selection. And your mouse itself also changed. See how there's a little arrow pointing to the left? And up here, there's this tiny little box. That is activating the different grids themselves. So that is left grid is 1, the right grid is 3, bottom grid is 2, and then there is a background, but we're not going to deal with that here today. So we are going to select 1 on our keyboard so that I'm definitely working on this side. I'm going to drag my first word over to my grid. So you can see that this is activated. I'm going to drag this word over, and when I do that, it's going to change its perspective already. So I'm going to drop this down here. It should snap to the grid itself. And you notice I dropped it down so it's the bottom right, but I left 1 block of spacing so my words don't touch one another. And now I'm just going to resize this thing just by grabbing a corner. And it's okay for this activity if we stretch this thing, if we manipulate it, because this is a perspective. It does get warped anyways. You see the further I move to the left, the further it goes back, the smaller it gets because it's a change in your perspective. So depending on how long your word is or how large your word is, yours is going to be further back than mine. But I'm just going to make mine to the top of the grid, down here to the bottom right. Now, that's done for right now, okay? So I no longer want to be on the left side. I now want to be on the right side. So that is the 3 key on our keyboard. So I'm going to hit 3. And when I do that, notice my arrow is going to change to the opposite side. So does this viewing grid up here. It changed over there. So now I'm going to take my second word and I'm going to drag that. Same process. I'm going to drop that right there so it connects down at the bottom. And I'll scale this thing up. Of course, you can kind of see my words are different in length. So the length going back is also going to be different. That's fine. This is just an activity. Okay. Now I want the bottom grid. So that is going to be grid number 2. So I'm going to select 2 on my keyboard. And I'm going to drag my first word down. And that's going to work perfectly on this side. Okay, notice I said on this side. Be patient. Do not jump ahead and do this yet. There's something we have to change. So I'm going to scale this. And when I scale this, even though they're different length words, I'm going to make them the same length so it somewhat looks like a shadow. Okay, maybe not scaled out this way as much, even though a shadow would do that. And it's okay if it kind of goes over some of this stuff. We will readjust this a little bit later on. Kind of scale your thing up to what you want. And zoom out. Now, I said be patient. Okay, with this bottom still selected. If I went to the other word and I drug this over, look what's going to happen. It faces the wrong direction. Okay, so that's why I said be patient. So I'm going to hit undo. We actually need to change a little bit about this word first. We're going to manipulate the system here. Switch over to my black arrow, select the text first, and then I'm going to switch to my free transform tool. Now, you can maybe get away with rotating it right here, but sometimes your text doesn't work the same. It might just kind of rotate the text box. So just to be safe, I'm going to go to the free tool. I'm going to hold in shift and go out past a corner where I can see that rotation. And I'm going to this so it's vertical. So the word is going upwards. Okay, not down, it's going up. Now I'm going to go back over to my perspective selection tool. That's that shift V. And it still should be pointing down. I should be on the bottom grid. Just in case, you might want to hit 2 if it's not. And now with it rotated like this, when we drag it over and we let it go, the word is going to be facing the correct direction. So we had to manipulate the system a little bit. So drag that up, resize this thing, get it to how you want. And then I'm going to show you how to change the colors. All right, so let's deactivate our grid so that doesn't bother us anymore. So we're going to hit Control-Shift-I to deactivate the grid. Control-Shift-I, and that will, with our grid deactivated, you'd think we'd just be able to come here and change the color. But if you see up at the top, it still says the perspective object, and the toolbar looks slightly different up here. Even if we try to find like our swatches, and we try to change the swatch here, it's not going to edit this. Well, up at the top, you'll see it said text or edit perspective. We're still technically in the edit perspective mode. So let's switch over to the edit text. And you'll see the text is probably humongous, like this is. It probably takes up your whole entire screen. So if you just switch over from the type tool over to the black arrow, it might be a little bit easier for you. But you just kind of click on there, and then you'll get the normal bar up at the top. And now we can kind of change the different color. If you want to add a stroke to it, sure, you saw my initial example how to stroke. Feel free to add whatever you'd like. It doesn't really how you customize this. Now, to get back into some of the other words, because you can see they are kind of isolated out, we just hit this back arrow right here. We want to go back to the perspective grid. Go back again. And now that one is edited. So what about some of these other ones? So if we click on these, we can go back up to edit text again and just repeat that process. Change your color to whatever you'd like. Maybe add a stroke color. And then just kind of double click off. If you want to change ones, it's the same process as well. This one I'm going to actually change the opacity so it kind of looks like a shadow. Knock that down something to like 30. And I'm going to eyedrop that color. And I should have done that first because now that I did that, my opacity went away. So I need to change that back to 30. Kind of fades out. Double click in the background, kind of goes away. So eyedrop my other text. Change this to maybe 30. Double click, and there we go. Created a 2-point perspective. Now, if you want to resize this entire thing, you want the grid to be gone and everything, so make sure you don't see any grid here. Just kind of select all of these. We can then hold in Shift, grab a corner, and we can resize this so that's onto our page a little bit better. You might get this warning, and basically if you read what it says the perspective will be expanded in order to perform this operation. If you are trying to move, scale, or copy the perspective, please use the perspective selection tool. So we're just going to hit OK. And I had to do that 3 times there. I'm guessing because there's 3 different sizes or 3 different sides of this. It's asking us to use the perspective selection tool here to resize the entire thing, but there's obviously around that. So we just resized the entire thing. I'm going to kind of position this, and that is the 2-point tool.